that was the only time I really had like a big like rage experience. After that, I was mainly just in a deep depression, having like thoughts of not existing, suicidal thoughts, thoughts of running away, thoughts that like I might hurt my baby, thoughts that I might run my car into something. So intrusive thoughts. And yeah, I realized for me, like that's not normal for me.
That's Kristina Frost, a new mom who lives in San Francisco with her 5-month-old daughter and husband. This is the second episode devoted to a parent's experience with postpartum depression, and Kristina and I chat just a few weeks before she is due to head back to work at Twitter as she nears the end of her maternity leave. Kristina shares that she was more cognizant of the possibility of experiencing postpartum depression since she already suffers from premenstrual dysphoric disorder, a much more severe version of PMS. But even though she was prepared, when symptoms of postpartum depression began, she was reassured by those around her that it wasn't depression. So she put off getting help until the negative and dark thoughts she was having became overwhelming. Kristina also talks about how this experience brought some insight into decisions her own mother made when Kristina was young. This is another very powerful episode, and I'm so thankful Kristina joined me to share this story. Welcome to the This Is Parenting podcast, a show devoted to sharing the roller coaster journey of parenthood from moms and dads all over the world. I'm your host, Andrea Rhodes. Information and show notes about today's episode can be found at thisisparentingpodcast.com. Let's get started. Tell me a little bit more about you and what's up with you.
Sure. I had my first baby back in July, so she's a little over 5 months now. I'm here in the San Francisco Bay Area, and it's quite interesting having a child here because it's really expensive and it's not really meant for babies or children. And I'm originally from the Midwest, so I feel like my upbringing was radically different from what it would be like here. And my husband's from Canada, Saskatchewan, so that's the prairie lands. It's just north of North Dakota. And so he was also raised very differently, very much more similar to the Midwest life, quintessential Midwest. And I've been out here in the Bay Area since 2010, so a little over 8 years. And yeah, I work in tech now, but I had to it took me about 4 years before I actually got into tech and actually got to do something with my degree, which it was like really hard to get into the workforce. But now that I'm in, I've been at Twitter for 5 years. Yeah, I've been at Twitter for 5 years now, a little over. They have a really great maternity leave and even paternity leave. It's the same 20 weeks, and they cap you up to 100% of your pay. And I took disability, so an extra disability, 10 week. I pretty much have 6 months of maternity leave, which has been really helpful through all of this.
So are you still on maternity leave as of today?
I am. I returned back on January 7th, so I'm pretty happy about that.
Okay, and this is baby number one?
Baby number one.
Well, tell me a little bit about how the experience is going. Did you have any preconceived notions going into this, being a first-time mom? What did you dream motherhood would be like?
For me, my sister's 10 years younger than I am, so I kind of had a taste of parenthood, kind of. Clearly not having a baby, but having to help raise a child. And I also nannied for a close friend of mine. I lived in their house, and I took care of the baby and got to live at the house, essentially. So for me, I knew it was going to be a lot of work, and I was hesitant actually about having children. It wasn't really on my bucket list. The older I got, the more I realized, maybe it's better off that I just don't have kids and help other people. Like, I feel like I had more energy to help other people than just having like a couple kids. And I feel like all my energy would go to that. And so far it's proving that, but it's only been 5 months. So, but my husband really wanted to have a family, and he's really committed to being a full-time caregiver. So he actually spends more time taking care of Emma, our daughter, than I do, actually. So that's been really great. And one thing that I was worried about, I prepared as much as I could. So I did the whole birth class and breastfeeding class and CPR for infants and newborn class. And I feel like I didn't really learn a whole lot, to be honest. Like I found like reading a few books were actually more in depth, more helpful. And the childbirth class I did take actually it was like a hypnobirthing class. So that was pretty helpful actually. But I didn't really prepare, of course, like anyone else for after the birth, besides, having a nursery and clothes and a breast pump. So the one thing I did worry about though was postpartum depression. I had a feeling I would get it just because I have PMDD. So it's like the more severe version of PMS. So I had a feeling I would get that. And so I was kept that top of mind for myself. We caught it like within a month, like I was diagnosed with it.
That is pretty rare, actually, to have the forethought to think about that as an outcome after birth. And that I don't want to say that was a good thing, but it was a good thing, right? I mean, you were at least prepared, and I assume your partner was prepared to kind of look for those signals and signs of postpartum depression. That's one of the things that I feel is a big gap in education, just in becoming a parent for the first time, is having all those warning signs prepared and ready to go, and having your partner or your family or your friends educated enough to, when they see those changes in you, to say something, to do something, to jump in. So tell me a little bit about how that happened. Did your husband notice first, or did you notice? It sounds like you were fairly prepared, but what did that actually look like?
Yeah, I felt like we had a pretty good birth experience. It took a lot out of me because I did lose 2 liters of blood. So I clearly wasn't all with it after. And it took me I was on a month of bed rest. My midwives wanted me to be resting as much as possible for that first month after. But I did notice like in 2 weeks, I think it was like week 2, I did kind of have like this like rage explosion come out, and I had no clue where it came from. And I like threw the stool. I had a stool over here because I had to like help myself get into bed. And I threw it because I was frustrated. And then of course I just like was crying on the floor, sobbing. And that's when I realized like this isn't right. At first my aunt was like, oh, it's just the baby blues. It's okay. Because she was a nurse, not in labor and delivery, but she was a NICU nurse, and she was like ICU. But anyway, so she was just like, oh, that's not postpartum depression. And then that was the only time I really had like a big like rage experience. After that, I was mainly just in a deep depression, having like thoughts of not existing, suicidal thoughts of running away. Yeah, thoughts that like I might hurt my baby, thoughts that I might run my car into something. So intrusive thoughts. And yeah, I realized for me, like that's not normal for me. And it was hard because, like I said, my aunt was here helping. She's kind of like my mom. And she was like, oh, you don't have postpartum depression. If you did, you'd be down all the time. Like you'd have no joy in your life. Like, I don't know. I feel like there's got to be an in-between here. And so I decided to take a test through like a therapist website, and I scored pretty high on it. And they recommended setting up an appointment. So I did. And then she's like, yeah, you have a pretty severe version of postpartum depression and, a little bit of anxiety, but it's mainly the depression. So I started therapy, and eventually that wasn't helping, or it wasn't helping enough. It wasn't enough, I should say. Still helping. And then I ended up going to a psychiatrist, because even my midwives were like, oh, medication could actually help, even though I'm the kind of person that's like other ways to channel my feelings. Like I said, I have PMDD, but I still refused to do anything like in terms of medication. But this, obviously I couldn't. I needed the help. So I've been seeing a psychiatrist since the baby was 2 months old.
So you're so strong to have noticed that difference in yourself. And I'm just sitting here thankful that you like took that quiz and then took action and all those steps kind of aligned well for you. And that's just, you just don't hear that happening as often. It's usually a person who displays like that falls through the cracks because nobody else is noticing, and it took you to notice and for you to be strong enough to take action, and just you were prepared and ready to do something about it.
Yeah, I feel like for me, I've always followed my intuition, and when I don't, it always is a bad idea. Never works out. So I knew for me something wasn't right, and it was hard because even my husband was like, "Oh, that's not postpartum depression. Like you'd have more fits of rage if you were," because he only knew someone who it displayed that, as a symptom. So I was like, "No, this is, it's like my version." Yeah, I feel like people need to really be trained, not just women, but their partners, in knowing or recognizing the signs. Like there should be a class. I know it's kind of a downer, but this information shouldn't be coming at you like when you visit your doctor or your pediatrician, because I know they make me fill out these things at the pediatrician appointments too, asking. But I honestly think if we were more proactive, and even finding information is really hard. Like Googling this stuff was really hard because I had a really bad day a couple weeks ago where I was just like, I just want to go inpatient just to like kind of reset. And I didn't know where to go. Called the psychiatrist office and they were like, she needs to go to the ER. My husband called because I was like, I'm too overwhelmed right now. And like, I'm not going to the ER. It's not that I'm unstable in that capacity. It's just like I need to go somewhere to just kind of reset myself. And it just was awful. And they were like, well, the psychiatrist is busy right now. Like she has an appointment in 2 days. I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, so it's like I either wait 2 days to talk to my psychiatrist to get answers, or I go to the ER. Like there's got to be something in between. If we had this information beforehand, we knew what to look for, we wouldn't have to have so many women hitting rock bottom, and going through so much pain before they get the help they need.
If they ever do.
Yeah, no. I mean, the thing that I've really learned through this so far is why my mom made the decision she made. And she clearly, when I look back, had postpartum depression. We don't have a good relationship right now, but it all makes sense to me.
So tell me a little bit more about your mom.
She's an addict, an alcoholic. So there's so many memories I have, but one of the ones that really stands out for me is Christmas Eve when I think I just turned 10 years old. My sister was still under a year old. She's like, I need to go and buy some tape to finish wrapping gifts. And so she left me, 10-year-old, with my sister, which to me, I'm like, oh, that's like, I'm pretty competent. I felt that way. And she didn't come back. And my grandparents came over and they're like, where's your mom? And then I told them, and turns out she went and found some friends to go get high with, hard drugs, not marijuana. And yeah, that was hard to be a 10-year-old and experience that and not understand why she would do something like that. And it's like, oh, this totally makes sense. She's trying to escape. She's trying to do anything to make herself feel better, to get her, her mind from hijacking her. And maybe she can't articulate that, but I can totally see it because I'm going through it right now.
Yeah, just something to feel normal again, like back into your normal skin, right?
Yeah.
One of the things you mentioned earlier that I want to talk about a little bit more, because it's definitely a pattern I see, is you were kind of reaching out for help and sharing with multiple people how you felt that maybe something was wrong, something's a little off. And a few people in your life were like, nah, that's not postpartum depression because, and
Yep.
They started projecting their own version of what they think postpartum depression looks like and how it presents in people. And that's something that I hear is pretty common, are these nice little buckets that people are supposed to present in of what, postpartum depression looks like versus baby blues versus just plain sleep deprivation. Mm-hmm. And that's fascinating to me. I'm really trying to figure out how we do educate and get this more out for people to understand that this comes in a variety of ways, a variety of colors, shapes, and sizes. And there's certainly not a one size fits all. And yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to chat about that a little bit more because you actually even tried to alert people even earlier that you felt something was wrong. On my side of things, I fell into the category of between baby blues and postpartum depression as it's defined. So I wasn't presenting with severe depression. I was still taking joy in portions of my life, but I was past that weird 2-week window of baby blues that suddenly baby blues are supposed to end after 2 weeks. I was well past that. I was into my 5th or 6th week. So I didn't fit in the traditional sense of anything. And so I fell through the cracks, and luckily it wasn't a severe situation for me. And I did come out of it fairly naturally on my own after 6 weeks. But looking back at it and talking to my husband who looked back at it as well, he knew something was wrong and he didn't do anything because he didn't know, he didn't feel empowered to. He thought it would make it worse. You don't want to upset new mama bear, right? So I think he was just hoping that, as I got stronger as a mom and got more sleep and just got my sea legs as a mom, that it would just kind of turn around. And I'm very thankful that it resolved the way it did and didn't progress, because I would have slipped through the cracks. And I share the story that you talked about, how the pediatrician's office gives you that questionnaire. And I legit lied on it.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing.
For the first 2 times, like, I'm not going to admit that I'm having these feelings about being a mom. Like, I'm not going to do that. And I totally agree. I actually don't feel it's the pediatrician's job to be watching over the mom. Their job is to be watching my baby and to do what is best for my baby. And so there's just something missing here in this sequence of checks and balances. Something is definitely not quite right.
Yeah, I agree. My head is all like thinking now. What can we do?
I'm always trying to figure out, like, there's got to be an innovative way to solve this problem. But so you're still, what's interesting about this interview is you're still in the thick of it. You're seeking help and it seems to be helping, but then you still have some down days. So tell me a little bit about, how your treatment has progressed and kind of how you're feeling today.
Yeah. In terms of treatment, I'm going to one-on-one therapy every other week. I was going every week. And I'm also going to see my psychiatrist around every 3 weeks. And I'm going to a therapist-led postpartum support group. So I've been doing that it's every other week for 16 weeks. And then we'll start back up in January, end of January. And then, I'm taking Buspar and Prozac. And we're still trying to figure everything out. So for that, I feel like it's mainly working. And I do appreciate that we're doing it carefully and slowly. And, she explains why we're doing things the way we're doing them. And she's someone who specializes in working with women with PMDD and postpartum depression and anxiety. I guess the whole, spectrum, PMADS. So that's been really helpful. And in terms of all of that formalized treatment, that's going pretty well, I would say. But I'm definitely still having, I would say every 3 weeks, a pretty down day. And then I, of course, still have down moments. Like before we had our call, actually, we were out to dinner and I was just I felt like my brain was hijacking me again, making me think of all these negative things, that my husband hates me and he's embarrassed by me. And I'm not ready to go on this podcast. And it's just throwing a bunch of hate at you, essentially. And sometimes I can recognize that my brain is hijacking me. And other times, I'm just in the thick of it. So, and that usually requires some serious distraction, like going outside, going shopping, going for a walk, sometimes sleep. I don't know.
Tell me a little bit more about the groups that you've joined. How has that helped with connecting with women who are going through what you're going through?
Yeah, it's actually been hard to find in-person support groups for postpartum depression.
You're in a very populated area.
Yeah, so I found one. And she's been doing it for, 10 or 20 years or something. She's been doing it for a long time. And it's only 5 or 6 people in a group. It's very small, and she only does one group per 2 months or whatever. It's just crazy to me because I know there's a lot more women who probably want this and don't know about it or don't know they need it. And, I've joined like some support groups on Facebook, but it's just not the same when it comes to mental health, I find. I think you really have a much safer space to talk about this stuff face to face. And then also just having people in your community that also are struggling through it is really helpful. So it's been really nice because we've created a text messaging group with the women in our group, and that's been really nice. And some are not continuing in January because that's just like it's the start of a new group. And then some of us are continuing to still join this new group. So we're still trying to find like dates and times that we can still meet up at least once a month to hang out and have time together and have honest conversations that it's hard because I feel like when I go to these other things that aren't around postpartum depression, like I don't know if I'm crazy, if I'm the only one having these thoughts, or if these other women have these thoughts, but they're just afraid to say something.
Tell me a little bit about how you feel the transition back to work will be since that's coming up in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, so I'm really lucky. One of the reasons I'm still at Twitter is because of their maternity leave and that the way that the work-life balance for parents is really great. So I'm actually not too worried, I would say. I will be returning back to work full-time. However, they're going to let me work from home 3 days a week.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I have that going for me. And eventually we're working towards moving to Canada, where my husband's from, and then I'll work full time remotely from there. So they've just started a program for that, and it's just really great that they're allowing people to work remotely. And like I said, I've been with the company for over 5 years, which is like a bajillion in like tech years, I should say. Most people like don't stay that long. They stay for like a year or two. They get their stock, their quarter amount of stock, and then leave. So I'm in it for the long haul. And so that's really exciting. I really like my job. It's not perfect, obviously, but there isn't any other tech company that I want to design for at this point. Maybe one day there will be, but yeah, it just feels like I get to go back to something that I know a lot about. And even though I know in theory a lot about parenting, when you have that layer of like postpartum depression added on, it really skews things. So
it's nice to go back to consistency.
Yeah. There's not, some consistency. Projects get moved up, and rushed, and some projects get completely canceled. And, I've been gone for 6 months, or I've had a lot of people leave the company and a lot of people join the company in that time. So I don't even know where my projects are because I gave them to people to handle and I trust them, but I have no idea what's going on with them. And I'm not going to worry about them right now because
no, I think you've got bigger fish.
Great. Yeah. And, my managers are they're very protective of their staff, which is really great. And, I told my managers that, I have postpartum depression and, they're very supportive of me and they want to make sure that I start with small projects and have easy wins because the last project I was working on was a big project. There's a lot of gray areas, like the Wild West, and I don't think I could mentally handle that right now.
Well, it sounds like they definitely have your best interest in mind, which again is a rarity, it seems, on employee front. So that's really good. I'm happy you're going back to such a supportive space.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of my time since I've moved out here in the Bay really creating a life that's surrounding myself with a good support system, with people that I'm inspired by, and and vice versa. So hopefully I'm inspiring them. And yeah, I just feel like for me as a product designer, I'm just obsessed with designing everything. So for me to design my life this way, it's not like I'm lucky, it's that I worked my way to get there in a way. I took the steps because I knew what I wanted.
I think my takeaway from the conversation we've had is you were so prepared and took all of the right steps ahead of time. And that really set you on the right path to get help when you needed it. And that's a rarity. So kudos to you to being so prepared and, seeing in yourself when things were not quite right.
Yeah, I think it's really important to use your previous life experience, because you're never fully prepared to be a parent. You're never going to be fully ready. But what you do have is your past life experience. And that's really helped me. Having a mom that's got a lot of mental health problems, that kind of stuff really prepared me, because those feelings aren't like myself. They're not normal, right? I've seen myself as normal, healthy, happy, and I've seen myself as like scared, like brain is hijacking me and all that stuff. So I think having those experiences, while they suck in the moment, has really prepared me to really know what's going on when things don't go right, because I've had that experience before.
You knew kind of the steps to take to get you back where you needed to be because you've done it.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm a little more prepared because I've done therapy in the past. I've seen depression. It's been a lot of time in like leadership programs. And one of the big messages in the last program I was in was really learning how to recover to yourself. So first you have to learn yourself, and then who you are on other people. And then also one of the other big takeaway messages was you need to ask for help. Leaders need help. And the thing is, everyone's a leader. That's also one of their big messages out of that. So I really learned how to ask for help, surround myself with people who are willing to give help and not make me feel guilty about it. There are definitely some family members that I can't really necessarily count on and I thought I could. I'm sure I'm not alone in this. So that was a real downer, and some friends too that can't necessarily handle it. So it's interesting when you find people, the people that you maybe just don't think would be the ones that would be really there for you, and they are. That's pretty magical.
Thank you, Kristina, for sharing your experiences. This is the second postpartum focused episode I've recorded, though most of my guests have touched on their own experience with PPD, but check out episode 15 with Laura Courrau for more on this topic. Head to thisisparentingpodcast.com for more info on these episodes.